Miss Lizzie. I don't ever smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditzies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz back in the house. And tonight we have the last tea time of June, and then we'll be jumping into July. My goodness, a half a year of 2026 is already done with. Tonight I have Chris Pratt in the house, and we're going to talk about Failure Factory, his book and all that good stuff, and his tea. And his tea is Teaching Education Awareness, Holding Schools Accountable. That is the tea we are serving in the house tonight. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz rolls. Get over to all those platforms: Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Clapper, Lemonade, and Blue Sky, all those good platforms. Give those a like, follow, and subscribe, and get these tea times out there because they do make a difference for the guest and for people who resonate with the stories. Also, jump over to podcast apps: Podbean, Listen Notes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, all those other good ones. Apple Podcasts. Miss Liz is on all of them, so give those a like, follow, and subscribe as well, and get these tea times out there if they resonate with you guys. Also, jump over to babyboomers.org. Miss Liz has been partnered up with them for 3 years. If you're looking to be on other podcast shows, they have over 50 different podcast shows that are hosting and always looking for guests, so check that out as well. Sometimes Miss Liz is not serving what you're looking for, so you can always jump over to babyboomers.org and check out some of my co-colleagues and all that on other podcasts. So let's get started with disclaimer and then a beautiful intro, and then we're going to get Chris in here and we're going to spill some tea and have some fun tonight. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experience and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and at any time you feel that this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where conversations challenge us to ask difficult questions, seek truth, and explore solutions that can create lasting change. Today's guest is an investigative journalist whose work has sparked national conversations about education, accountability, and the future of our children. Please join me in welcoming Chris Pratt, an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter and author of Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. Through years of an in-depth investigative reporting, Chris uncovered troubling realities within one of America's largest public school systems, exposing issues surrounding academic performance, accountability, school safety, and the impact these challenges have on students, families, educators, and communities. His work as an important question. Are children failing schools or are the schools failing children? Today, we'll discuss the research behind Failure Factory, why accountability matters, the importance of investigative journalism, and what meaningful educational reform could look like for future generations. Today's Tea Time will explore investigative journalism and accountability, the challenges facing public education, giving children opportunity to succeed, why asking difficult questions matter, and building a better future through awareness and action. Chris reminds us that real change begins when people are willing to uncover the truth and work together towards solution. So grab your cup and join us for an important conversation filled with insight, awareness, and real life tea, truth, experience, and awareness. So let me get Chris in here and let's spill some tea. Welcome,
Well, hello.
Chris.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, did I lose you for a second?
I don't think so.
Oh,
Can
there
you
you
hear me?
are. I got you now. My little pesky hearing aids, they take a few seconds sometimes to kick back in. So welcome, Chris.
No worries. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So Chris, let's get to know you a little bit before we jump into your book, Failure's Factory. Who is Chris as a little guy and who is Chris now?
It was Chris as a little guy. Well, Chris is from southeastern Pennsylvania. I grew up in a really small town about 45 minutes to an hour west of Philadelphia, a little farm town, the type of place that has more cows than people. And my dad was a school teacher for 5 years, and he was a woodshop teacher. So I grew up in a woodshop, and I had the type of life that any kid would have, living, in the woods and in the country, driving Jeeps and fishing and doing things like that, playing sports. I went to college in University of Pittsburgh. I played baseball there for 4 years, and then I started writing for a newspaper. Right after that, I went back to school at Temple University, got a broadcasting degree, and then I started my career in Madison, Wisconsin, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. And then in 2017, I moved from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore to start something called Project Baltimore. And what Project Baltimore is that we are a team of 5. There's 2 photographer editors, 2 producers, and myself as a reporter. And we're an investigative unit, and we focus on one topic. And since January of 2017, 9.5 years ago, that topic has been public education. And the reason that I wrote this book right here, the reason I wrote Failure Factory, How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future, is because what I've learned over the past 9.5 years investigating public education, I didn't know. I mean, my dad was a public school teacher. I went to public schools growing up my entire life. And I didn't really understand how public education worked, how it was funded, how it operated, what the incentives were. And so I wrote Failure Factory because I figured that if I didn't know a lot of these things, that a lot of people don't know a lot of these things. So I really wrote this book to educate people, for lack of a better word, on what is really happening in public education.
Well, I'm really glad because before we went live, you asked me where I was from. I'm from Canada and you're from the United States, but we still have the same public school systems that are doing the same damage to our children, that I feel that they're failing our children. So I really wanted to have this conversation with you tonight, Chris, and get the understanding of where the funding comes from for a public school and all of that good stuff, like the promotions, the grading, the discipline, the school safety, the violence, because that's happening worldwide. That's not just in the United States. That's happening here in Canada as well.
Mm-hmm. It certainly is. So which topic would you like to get to first?
Let's get to the funding, because I've always wondered where the funding comes from for the public schools.
All right. So the way that works in Baltimore and the way it works in many places around America is that there's 3 main funding sources. You have the federal government, you have the state government, and then you have your local government, which in Maryland would be your counties, because the counties are their own school system and they're very large. And the county that I'm in Baltimore County, and my kids go to public school here. We have 110,000 kids in our school system, about 175 schools, very big. And the way the funding breaks down is it's different depending on where you are. In Baltimore City, about 70% of the funding in Baltimore City comes from the state taxpayers. About 20% comes from the city, and about 10% comes from the federal government. So that's your breakdown of funding in Baltimore City: 70% state, 20% city, and 10% federal government. Now, where I am, and in the other jurisdictions in Maryland, it's very different than that. Where we are, the state does about maybe 30% of the funding. The local jurisdictions put in most of it, about 60%, and then you have the last 10% coming from the federal government. So here in the counties and most of the areas in Maryland, it's 60% county, local, 30% state, and then 10% federal government. So that is how the funding structure is broken down here.
It sounds familiar to like what's going on here, like the federal, the states. For us, it's provincial and stuff like that. But we're just changing words, but we're actually seeing the same kind of layout as what you're seeing in the states as well. So, Chris, what first led you to investigate the Baltimore educational system?
It was really just the idea of Project Baltimore. So I was working as an investigative journalist in Washington, D.C., and I had a great job. I was working for the ABC News affiliate. I was in the political capital of the world, and this opportunity really came up. And I work for a company called Sinclair Broadcast Group, and they own the ABC News affiliate in Washington, D.C., and we also own the Fox affiliate in Baltimore, Fox 45. And they asked me if I wanted to come up here. And it was really an intriguing thing to do, to have that opportunity as an investigative journalist, because it's pretty rare to be able to focus on one topic. And that's something in Failure Factory that I talk a lot about, is because the media landscape has really changed. And there's not a lot of investigative journalism anymore because it's expensive. There's 5 of us on this team. We have lawyers that look at all of our scripts. We've been sued. And we've been sued because, we live in America and we have a litigious society. And when you're doing investigative journalism, there's a lot of people that you can make upset. And we have been sued. And I talk about being sued in Failure Factory for reporting things that were 100% true and having to go to court and spending money, to be able to defend ourselves. And we've never had to pay out a single dollar to anybody. But that's just part of that comes with the territory. So it's expensive. And there's not a lot of investigative journalism anymore, which is unfortunate, because local investigative journalism is extremely important. Doing what we do, the type of work that we do, uncovering how tax dollars are being spent or misspent, is extremely important for a local community. And to be able to come to Baltimore, to be able to do the investigative journalism I always wanted to do, which is really to become an expert on one topic and focus on that one topic and not be pulled in 15 other directions, and have a team working with us, it's really an honor. And I'm very thankful and grateful for the opportunity to be able to do this type of work, which leads to the type of book like Failure Factory is. Because if I weren't doing this type of work and I weren't involved in it to the degree that I am, I wouldn't have the expertise to write this type of book.
Well, we have a question here from Kelly, and it was there one investigation that changed your perspective the most?
There was a lot of investigations that changed my perspective. So let me just kind of get into a couple of them that were really eye-opening. So as I said, I when we started in January of 2017, I really thought that I knew how public education worked, with my dad being a school teacher, me going to public school. And I'll kind of take you a little bit through one of the stories that is in the book. Now, the book covers 8 years, from 2017 to 2025. And this particular investigation we did covers 5 of those years. So what happened was, when I got to Baltimore in January of 2017, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything about the city. So I did what investigative journalists do, which is I started looking at data and extrapolating outliers from data. And those outliers tell stories. So I took all the state testing data for Baltimore City Public Schools. There was about 165 schools at the time in the city. I organized all the data, math and reading test scores for every school. And what I found was there were 6 entire schools in Baltimore City that did not have a single student test proficient in any subject. Hundreds of kids, 6 entire schools, where not one student tested proficient in anything. So we break that story, and it's our first viral story, as it should be. That's very alarming. But after that story aired, I started having teachers from those schools reach out to me. And what they were saying was, you're right, your data is correct, but you realize these students are also graduating. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. How can these students be graduating? And the answer was that their grades were being changed. Their failing grades were being changed to passing so they can matriculate through the school system and eventually get a high school diploma. And if you want to know why Baltimore is a very struggling city with high crime, high murder, high poverty, there's your reason right there, that the public education system is graduating students who are not prepared for career or college. And so what I did was I had many teachers that were reaching out to me. So I filed a public records request with Baltimore City Public Schools looking for information, documentation, emails related to grade changing, internal investigations, things like that. And Baltimore City Schools gave me nothing. They didn't give me one sheet of paper. So in December of 2017, we sued Baltimore City Public Schools for violating Maryland's Public Information Act. 2 years later, it went to court. I testified for a couple hours in front of a Baltimore City judge, and we won the lawsuit. And what we got out of that lawsuit were thousands of emails, and I think it was 22 internal grade changing investigations that showed that grade changing, taking failing grades and changing them to passing, was a significant problem. And thousands and thousands and thousands of kids in the school system were failing, but the school system was changing their grades to passing so that these students could matriculate through the system and eventually get a diploma. And when you ask me, really what was one of the moments that I decided that I had to write Failure Factory, that was one of the moments, because the school system spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight us in court to not release the documents that proved what was really happening inside the school system. And that was fighting us to that degree is what they were willing to do to try to not let this information go public, because they didn't want the public to know. And that, what I just described, is not just happening in Baltimore. And it's one of the reasons that I wrote Failure Factory. What I just described, changing failing grades to passing to matriculate kids through the system, is happening all around the country, because the schools are very, very aware of what their data looks like. They want their data to look good. They want the schools to look good on paper. And the easiest way to do that is to simply change the numbers.
Absolutely. And they're doing that in Canada. It's no kid is left behind is what they consider it. So they're just giving them passing grades to get to their graduation, to graduate. There's so much similarities in the two countries that it just breaks my heart, because I feel that the educational systems are failing our children today. Especially during COVID time too. I find that it really messed with the kids' mental health and all that as well, Chris. We have some questions that are coming in. I'd like to get them up to you. The first one is from Michael. What was the biggest challenge while researching Failure Factory?
The biggest challenge was the school system putting up blockades. They don't want us to have the data. They didn't want us to have the data. And we had to sue them. And we had to go to court. Like what I just described to you took 5 years. That was 5 years of fighting the school system to get documents that were public documents. The taxpayers already paid for these documents. They were theirs. And the school system refused to release them. And, I happen to work for a company that has enough money that you can sue a school system to try to get the truth. But what are parents supposed to do? What are they supposed to do when they want information from the school and the school refuses to give them the information, especially in a city like Baltimore, where 28% of the kids are living in poverty? How are they supposed to go up against the school system and get the truth when we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars? And Something else that came out of that lawsuit that we talk about a lot in the book is that the Baltimore City judge, thought that what Baltimore City schools did was so wrong. She forced the school system to pay our legal fees. So she forced the school system to pay Fox 45's legal fees of $200,000 because we never should have had to have gone to court. So if you take the $200,000 that Baltimore City schools had to pay our lawyers, and then how much they paid their own attorneys, you're looking at a significant amount of money, maybe $500,000, maybe more, to try to stop public documents from being seen by the public. And that is something that we still fight today. So 9.5 years later, we still have school systems that do all they can to not give us the information that we want. I mean, even up to last week, we filed public records requests with certain school systems looking for information, and they don't want to give it to us. It's like they're baiting us, and they're like saying they're going to challenge us to challenge them. And this is a huge problem in America, that not just school systems, but government entities in general, they don't want to release information. They don't want the public to know what is really going on.
So, Chris, why is accountability so difficult within the public educational systems?
Because they have a lot of money, they have a lot of power, they have a lot of votes, and that is something that is really hard to break through, especially in a place like Baltimore City. So Baltimore City is a city that there's only one political party that runs this city. And I'm not suggesting that Republicans have all the answers, but what I am suggesting is that a two-party system is certainly better than one-party control. And what you have in a place like Baltimore is one-party control. There has not been a Republican elected to Baltimore City Council since the 1930s. There's not been a mayor who's Republican elected in Baltimore City since 1960. So for the past, 65 years, this city has been one party rule. And what that really has created is a lack of checks and balances. And we also happen to live in a state that is one party rule. Now, we have had governors, Republican governors. It's not as one party rule as Baltimore City, but Maryland right now, there's only one political party that has any power, and that's the Democrat Party. And if you want to grow in the Democrat Party, or any political party for that matter, you can't criticize the party. And what we really have seen in Baltimore is that public officials do not want to hold the school system accountable because their party has created it. And if you come out and start criticizing the school system or trying to hold the school system accountable, that can hurt your future political aspirations, because your political party, which is the one in Baltimore City, is the one that has been in control of the school system for 60 years single-handedly. And that is one of the big problems that we're seeing, especially in a situation like there is in Baltimore, where there just aren't any checks and balances. And the money is just given to the school system by the politicians, and the politicians don't hold the school system accountable for the results that students and taxpayers get for that money.
Absolutely. Well, we have a comment that came in from Adventure Shows. And one thing that stands out is how accountability benefits everyone, not just schools, but entire communities. And then we have
that's certainly true. Yeah, you can't. So let me give you a little bit of data here to kind of emphasize my point. So we started doing Project Baltimore in 2017. We're now in 2026, 9 years. The attendance rate in Baltimore City is lower now than it was 9 years ago. The dropout rate is higher now than it was 9 years ago. Chronic absenteeism is higher now than it was 9 years ago. The average SAT score is lower now than it was 9 years ago. But over those 9 years, the school system has received a nearly 40% increase in funding. The school system went from a $1.3 billion budget to a $1.8 billion budget. The school system gets about $500 million per year more now than it did in 2017. as enrollment is declining. Enrollment has declined about 7% in the past 9 years, but the budget has increased about 38% with falling academic outcomes for students. And when that is happening, and your governor and your mayor and your city council members aren't screaming that this is unacceptable, why would it ever improve? If you're working for a company and you get a 38% pay increase over 9 years and you're not being held accountable for your product, what would be your motivation to improve the quality of that product? And that's largely what we're seeing in schools.
It's really disheartening because where's the money going?
Well, the money is going to salaries. So in Baltimore City schools, about 85% of the money that it gets goes to salaries, goes to benefits, goes to pensions. So the people that are working in the school system are making very good money. We did a story I think about maybe 2 months ago, where I think the number is around 30% of the people who work for Baltimore City Public Schools are making six-figure salaries. 30%. You had, what was it, 58 people making over $200,000 a year that are working for the school system. $200,000 a year in a city where 28% of the students are living in poverty. And they're largely living in poverty because they're not getting the proper education and haven't been for generations. And now you just have this cycle that's repeating over and over again. But yet the people that are working for the school system make very good salaries. And more people are working for the school system. Since Project Baltimore started in 2017, the school system has hired about 2,200 additional employees. So you have 2,200 additional employees to educate about 7,500 fewer students because the enrollment's going down. So you have more employees, fewer students, and the educational outcomes are still not meaningfully increasing. And you start looking at all this data, and that's why I wrote this book. It's a failure factory, how Baltimore City public schools are depriving taxpayers and students of a future, because you're putting so much more money into a school system, but you're not getting the educational outcomes as a result.
Absolutely. You know, it's sad. The truth is right in front of our faces, and people are just turning a blind eye. We have a question here from Jeffrey that came in, and it's what keeps you motivated when working on long investigations?
The importance of it. And I'm not trying to, take myself too seriously at all, because I don't think I take myself too seriously. But I firmly believe that the most important topic there is public education, because it affects everything else. It affects your home values. It affects your tax rates. It affects incarceration rates. We know in America, more than half of people that are in jail do not have high school diplomas and are not reading and doing math at proficient levels. It affects your economy. How are you supposed to grow your economy if you're graduating people that are not proficient in reading and writing? And we know, looking at the data in Baltimore and in many parts of America, that's happening. People are graduating and they're not proficient in reading and writing. And if public education can improve, all of those other things get better. And the crime, the poverty, the blight, I make the case in Failure Factory that those things are not the problem. Those things are a symptom of the problem. The problem is that for many, many years, the public education system has simply not been providing the proper education to the people of Baltimore. And why this is so important is that Baltimore used to have nearly 1 million people. It's now down to about 500,000. And people are leaving the city. And we can't allow this to happen to more American cities. It's already happened to a number of them. It's happened to Detroit. It's happened to Milwaukee. It's happened to Cleveland. And it's happened to Baltimore. And there's others in there as well. But what I'm hoping that this book can do, what I'm hoping Failure Factory can do, is really open people's eyes to how these school systems are structured, how the incentives are based, and there are solutions. The solutions are in this book of how we can make public education better. And quite frankly, it's not that hard. We know how to educate kids. This is 2026. If we don't know how to educate kids by now, shame on us. the reality is we do know how to educate kids, but there's so much money involved now. And there's so many people making so much money benefiting off the status quo that they don't want the system to change because it could potentially cost them money.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question here from Lucy for you, Chris. Is how has Project Baltimore influenced public conversations about education?
Well, when we filed that lawsuit and we won, that was a big deal because there's not many public records lawsuits because they're expensive and generally you don't get attorney's fees back. So there's not a lot of them filed. So when we filed this lawsuit, it sparked a huge conversation throughout the state of Maryland. And when we won the lawsuit, it really set precedent for public records lawsuits moving forward and how they really should be viewed and how they can be judged upon and how they can be executed to make sure that the public is getting the records that the public's paid for and deserved. But also outside of that, the grade changing sparked huge conversations about grade changing. The way that discipline is in schools. We talk a lot about discipline in schools in Failure Factory, about the lowering of arrests and suspensions and expulsions and violence to make the schools appear safer than they actually are. We talk a lot about that. That's one of the biggest problems in the schools is violence and bullying, and the schools downplaying that violence because they want the buildings to appear safe on paper. They want people to say, oh, look, your suspensions are down 45% in the past 6 years. You must be doing a great job. Your school must be safe. Well, you talk to teachers and they're like, no, it's worse. We're just not suspending kids anymore because the principal wants the school's numbers to look good. These are the things that we're really reporting on in the schools, in Project Baltimore, in Failure Factory, that are really sparking a debate because these are a lot of things that people had thought were true over the years. But now what we're showing and we're proving is that it is true.
Well, it's almost like they're manipulating the systems, right? On paper, it's perfect.
They are. Oh, they absolutely are. I talked to teachers in here. I'll give you an example. I talked to a teacher who said that, well, let me back up and say this. So in Maryland, there is a category called persistently dangerous school, and there's a formula for it. So if you have, let's say, too many suspensions, expulsions, weapons violations, fights, knives, guns, things like that, there's a formula that if you cross a threshold, you are going to be labeled a persistently dangerous school. And I talked to a teacher in Failure Factory who says all the principals know what the formula is. And if a school begins to approach that level where they would be considered persistently dangerous, he said he has seen that the principals just stop disciplining the kids. He told a story that a kid brought a knife into a school one day, and the principal just took the knife and didn't report it because it was possible that knife could have put them over the threshold to be labeled persistently dangerous. And there are roughly 1,400 public schools in the state of Maryland. You know how many are labeled persistently dangerous right now?
How many?
None. Not one.
What?
Not one. There has not been a persistently dangerous school in Maryland in 11 years because the principals know the formula and they're not going to allow their school to be considered persistently dangerous. Now, keep in mind that Baltimore City is not just one of the most dangerous cities in America. It's one of the most dangerous cities in the Western Hemisphere every single year. But there's not one persistently dangerous school in the entire city or state.
I really hope my listeners and my audience are listening to tonight's conversation because these are conversations that we need to bring to the table. You know, the hard truths. And I love hard truth. That's what I like serving at the tea time table is bringing the awareness here because, and your tea is teaching educating awareness, holding schools accountable. You know, it's not just in Baltimore, it's worldwide. We need to start holding schools accountable, all the public schools, because there's so much stuff that we do not see. They make it look perfect on paper. Like you said, they know the formulas. So they play with the numbers, they play with the grades, they play with, you know, it's sad. And it really gets me up infuriated. I just, this is something that I am passionate about, is education. This is what tea time is teaching educational awareness, that there's a lot of things in front of us that we're all turning a blind eye to because there's a dollar sign in front of it. And it's sad.
Billions of dollars in front of it. Now, Baltimore City Schools is a $1.8 billion budget for the fiscal year that starts tomorrow, because the fiscal year is run on July 1st to June 30th. Baltimore City Schools budget is going to be $1.95 billion. That's a $650 million increase from 2017. That's a 50% increase. Now, the numbers I gave you of the 1.8 billion, that was for 2025, because 2026 hasn't started yet. It starts tomorrow, actually. But that's going to be 1.95 billion, a 50% funding increase. I mean, that's a staggering amount of money.
That is crazy. We have a question here for you from Michael. Is how do you balance objectively, I can't say that word, while covering emotional stories?
It's hard. It really is. As a journalist, you try really hard to not let your emotions dictate how you're going to write a story or how you're going to present a story. And we are human. We have emotions. I do try my best to keep them out, but sometimes it's very difficult. In Failure Factory, I tell the story of a woman named Michelle Bradley. And Michelle Bradley made it to high school in Baltimore City. She was about 38 years old when I interviewed her. And she never learned how to read. And she now had 2 daughters that were in Baltimore City public schools. And I have 2 daughters. And it was heartbreaking to speak with her, because the things that I can do with my daughters, she can't do with hers. She can't help them with their homework. She can't read to them at night. Now, she made it to high school in Baltimore City schools and never learned how to read. Now, after I interviewed her, it turned out that she had dyslexia, but the school system never diagnosed it or didn't care to diagnose it, and just kept pushing her through the school system, knowing that she couldn't read. And it's heartbreaking to talk to somebody like that, because it's not her fault. Yeah. And it was the school system's fault, because she needed help. And the school system couldn't give her help, or didn't want to give her help. And those things are still happening today. And I would encourage people to pick up a copy of Failure Factory just to read Michelle Bradley's story, because it is very eye-opening to how important public education is and how we have to hold our schools accountable.
The book Failure Factory, do you use it in the courtrooms?
Excuse me?
Do you use your book in the courtrooms, Chris?
Can I use my book in the courtrooms? You could.
So like if somebody wanted to present a case on how the school is failing their children, could they use your book?
Yeah.
How do lower academic standards impact future generations, Chris?
That's a good question. There's a million things running through my head right now, because what we've really seen in America over the past 15 years is the lowering of academic standards. And one of the chapters in Failure Factory I devote to that topic. And what I'm doing is I'm showing people how they can see where their school system is in terms of those academic standards. And what I mean by that is that there's language in school board policies. And I know the least sexy topic in the world is school board policy, but it is so important. And what I do in the book is that I show you what to look for. I show you the language that you can look for that would tell you if your school system's in trouble. And what I mean by that is what school systems do is when academics begin to slide, they lower academic standards to even the curve. It's a way to manipulate the data to make the schools look better than they are by making it easier for the kids to pass and for the kids to graduate, the lowering of academic standards. And what I do in Failure Factory is I show you what to look for. And I'll give you one example. There is something in Baltimore City schools called the 50% rule, 50% rule. And what that says is that the lowest grade that a student can receive for a marking period or semester is a 50%. The student never even has to show up for class, never has to do one homework assignment, never has to take a test, never has to read a book, and they will get a 50% as a final grade for that marking period or semester. So in Baltimore City, a passing grade is a 60. That's the minimum passing grade. That's a D minus. So on a 100-point scale, students only have to earn 10 points to graduate because they cannot get lower than a 50. And I talk to teachers in Failure Factory who tell me that students know this. They understand. So what they'll do is they'll not come to class for 40 days. And that's not an exaggeration. They will not come to class for 40 days because they know when they come on that 41st day, they're going to have a 50%. So then they do a little bit of work, get up to a 60, and then they're good and they pass the class. Or what teachers tell me that the kids do is that they'll come to school, they'll do some work, they'll get their grade to say a 70, and then they won't come to class the rest of the year because the teacher cannot give them below a 50 for the rest of the school year. And this is the environment that has been created in many public schools. And the reason I know this is because in my county where I am, we have the 50% rule. And it started in about 2015. And if you look at the performance, the academic data in Baltimore County public schools, you'll see in 2015 it started to go down. So the school system passed the 50% rule so more kids can pass, more kids can matriculate, more kids can graduate. That's the point. That's why they did it. Now, other school systems in Maryland, higher performing school systems, don't have the 50% rule because those kids are doing better. But as soon as the academics begin to fall, you start seeing policies like that get adopted in public education. And in Failure Factory, I give you many more examples. But if you see the 50% rule in your school board policies, that is an indication that your school is struggling academically. But you wouldn't know that because they're making it easier for kids to pass.
Chris, can anybody see the school board policies?
Yeah.
So that's public records.
Oh, yeah.
Correct?
Uh-huh. Yep. You can, if, depending on where we are, they're called school board docs, DOCS, school board docs or board docs. And that's where the public policies exist. So if you go to your school board's page, your local school board, they will have their policies listed on their website. And you can go on there and you can look at their policies.
So, Chris, how can we change the systems? How can we break these broken systems?
Well, there's a number of ways that you can do it. The most effective and efficient way is that people have to vote. You have to go to the polls and you have to vote for the right people. And I'm not saying that that's Democrat. I'm not saying that's Republican. I don't think political parties are necessarily important here. But you have to vote for the people that are going to hold the school systems accountable. A lot of people look at local school board elections and don't care. And what I'm suggesting is that your local school board has more influence over your life. If you're in America, I would say the school board impacts your day-to-day life more than the president of the United States, unless you are in the military. Because your local school board, as we mentioned a short while ago, it is impacting your housing values, your tax rates, your local crime rate, your local economy. Your local school board is the most important local political body that you have. But most people dismiss those elections. They don't even know who's running. They don't care who's running. And what I'm saying is, no, put your time into that. I'm not saying that you got to put 40 hours into it, but find out who's running and find out who the candidates are that are going to hold the school system accountable and say, hey, if we give you a 50% funding increase and you don't give us a better educated student, superintendent, you're gone. Principal, you're gone. Teachers, you're gone. We are going to demand that you give us a better educated student if we are going to give you more tax dollars. And that's what needs to happen. People need to wake up. People need to understand the importance of their local elections. And it's not just local school board. It's your local senators, your local state senators. It's your local state House of Delegates or House of Representatives, whatever you happen to have in your jurisdiction. Those are incredibly important elections. But what we see in America is that people just get all worked up over the president. And that's when you have high voter turnout. And
well, it's
and
a
that's
distraction,
really,
right, Chris? It's to take away from what really needs to be fixed.
yeah, it really is a shame. People need to pay attention to their local elections, specifically local school board.
Absolutely. And how can parents get involved?
That way, run for school board, be involved, be in the school. I tell a lot of people, make sure that your kids' teachers know who you are. Make sure the principal knows who you are. I'm not saying you have to be a squeaky wheel, but make sure that they know you're watching. That is really important. Make sure they know you're watching. Pay attention. If you can, go to your school board meetings. Understand what's going on. In today's world, all the school boards that at least I'm aware of, they stream. They have YouTube channels or they stream on their website. You don't even have to go to school board meetings anymore. It's made very easy. You can listen to it at home. Listen to it at home. Find out what's going on. Get involved. And if you don't, Baltimore can happen to your school system. It can happen. It has happened all around America. And that's why I wrote Failure Factory. Hopefully, we can stop it from happening. And the school systems it has happened to, they can be improved.
Chris, how long do you think the schools have been failing our children?
Yeah, so that is really interesting to think about because so I talked to people in the book. I talked to a Reverend Al Hathaway in Failure Factory, and he's about 75 years old, and he grew up in Baltimore City, and he went to segregated schools. And he told me when he was in public school in Baltimore, he felt like he got a great education. And now he thinks the education is terrible. So here you have a man who grew up in segregation, went to a school that was all black kids because that was the law at the time. And he felt like he got a good education. And now he feels like the schools are not providing a good education. And we're being told now that, the schools are free, and you can go to any school that you want, depending on where you live. We're not segregated anymore. And he's like, no, it was better during segregation. And so it's a really fascinating topic to ask, how long have they been bad? I felt like I got a good education in my public school. Now, it was rural. I was in the country. But if you even talk to people in Baltimore City, even in the 80s and 90s, they'll tell you that the public school system was better. And that's a whole different podcast right there of what really happened and where did education go wrong? Was it in 1979 when the U.S. Department of Education was created? Was it that massive federal government bureaucracy that really slowed the wheels of public education and kind of made it grind to a halt? Was there something else? Was it the massive amount of funding that it went into public education? And are we putting too much money into public education to the point where people are no longer getting into public education to help kids or getting into it to acquire wealth? I mean, we're certainly seeing that. People are making a lot of money now in public education. Was that the problem? Is it all the standardized testing that we're doing? Is it just the lack of accountability, not holding kids accountable for their own actions to show up to school for attendance or violence? It's a really fascinating question.
Chris, what message do you think we're sending our children?
Well, a lot of the teachers are telling me that the message that we're sending them is that they're not going to be held accountable. They can fight in school. They're not going to be suspended. They can bring weapons to school at times and not be suspended. They cannot show up to class, and they can get half credit for that class by not showing up. That's a policy in Baltimore City schools and many places around the country. And what message does that send to kids? Like, if you don't go to work, do you get half of your salary? Of course not. But in school systems, if you don't go to school, you get half of your grade. That if that doesn't send a message of you're not going to be held accountable, I'm not sure what does. And I talked to a number of teachers in Failure Factory that say that that message is heard loud and clear by students, and it is destructive.
Chris, how many teachers did you speak to for Failure Factory?
Oh, a lot. I mean, there's not hundreds of teachers in the book, but hundreds of teachers over the past 9.5 years we've spoken to. And if there's teachers that are listening to us right now, I'll put it this way. I've been, my book came out, a number of months ago, and I've been doing the book tour and talking to people and trying to spread the message. And I've never had anybody disagree with me about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, because what I'm saying is true. Everything that we've talked about so far in your show is true.
Well, we have a question here from Golf Tips, and it's, are you currently working on another book or investigate project?
So Project Baltimore is continuing. We do, we had a story. We do multiple stories. We had a story yesterday. We have a story tomorrow. We produce 2 reports every single week, and we're continuing to move forward with our mission, which is to expose how taxpayer dollars are being spent and the quality of education that students are getting. I do plan on writing another book. I want to write a book, the statistical analysis that I've done in Failure Factory. I want to do in other cities around America. And I think that you're going to see the same exact thing. You're going to see massive amounts of additional funding going in, but you're not going to see the educational outcomes coming out. And at the same time, you're going to see the lowering of academic standards. And another reason that I think that oftentimes you see the lowering of academic standards is because when so much money is put into public education, the schools have to show the public something. And they can't allow the academics to completely fall apart as they're getting more money. So part of the lowering of the academic standard is to try to create the impression that that money is making a positive outcome.
Well, Chris, we have a question here from Joe, and it's for you. What accomplishment in your journalism career are you most proud of?
I mean, the last 9.5 years of doing this type of work and talking to people like you that are interested in our work and writing Failure Factory. And it's really been my life's work. I've been doing this every single day for 9.5 years on one topic, on one issue, and really trying to understand what the problems are. And it's not surface level. This is not a surface level book. This book is weedy. This book is drilling down into the core problems of the issue. And that's really, it's satisfying for me. It's gratifying for me. It's humbling for me and my team to be able to do this type of work, because we do feel that we're shining a spotlight on an injustice. And not just an injustice to taxpayers, but an injustice to the kids that are in the school system that aren't getting the education that they need. It's not fair to them. It's not right for them. And it's setting them up for failure.
And Chris, why do you believe Baltimore's story reflects a national issue?
Because I've been talking to a lot of people, and I know it to be true. I can look at the data in other places. I can see the amount of funding going into the school systems. We can see the educational outcomes that are coming out. I've had a lot of people reach out to me saying that they've looked into their school board policies and they have seen the 50% rule in their schools. So I know that the things that are happening in Baltimore are not just happening in Baltimore.
Chris, one topic we didn't hit on tonight is the promotions. What's about the promotions in the book?
Promotions of students. Is it what type of promotion are you asking?
You listed grading, promotions, discipline, school safeties, and violence.
Well, yeah, the promotions would be the promotions of the students. Like, how are the students getting promoted? And many of them are getting promoted because their failing grades are being changed to passing, because of the lowering of academic standards, like the 50% rule. It's the idea of just pushing these kids through the school system, because funding is based on enrollment. So if you can keep the kids enrolled, you keep the money coming in. And the easiest way to do that is to just keep passing the kids through the grades.
So Chris, how are they getting the funding if the kids are not enrolling?
They are enrolling. And that's the thing. So as long as the kid's enrolled, as long as that student is enrolled, the school will get the funding. And that is one of the main revelations that we learned that led to me to write this book, is because once I learned that schools are not funded to educate kids, they're funded to enroll kids. Once a child is enrolled, the student gets the funding. The school does not have to educate that child. That child does not have to be educated for the school to get the funding. The school just has to enroll that child, and the school gets the funding. Once I learned that was probably the moment where I said, I got to write a book, because that's pretty eye-opening. And that's something that I didn't realize in January of 2017, that schools are funded based on enrollment, not based on education.
Wow. So, Chris, how long did it take you to write your book?
Well, I mean, 8 years, I guess. There's 8 years of information that's in it. The book starts in early 2017. It goes through 2025. And, if you're asking me how long did it take, I mean, that's how long it took. But for me to actually sit down and put it all together and write it, it took me well over a year.
So, Chris, with the books, how are the students and family reacting to the book?
Well, to say it's positive, it doesn't sound right, but people are thanking me for writing it. People in Baltimore City are thanking me for writing it, because it's the idea of shining a light on an injustice and opening people's eyes to what is really happening inside of these schools. And the people that are inside of the schools, like many of the teachers, even many of the administrators, the students, the families, the moms and the dads, they can see what's going on. And they're thankful that, at least the ones that I speak with, they're thankful that we're here, that Project Baltimore is here telling their stories, because the information needs to get out. It's just like when we sued Baltimore City Schools. The information needs to get out. People need to know what's happening.
Well, Chris, I really want to just encourage you to continue doing it and getting that truth out there for all the schools across America. And if anybody would like to reach out to you or have you on their podcast, where can they find you and where can they find the book?
Sure. So chrispapst.com, CHRISPAPST.com. You can get a hold of me there. All my social media accounts are Chris Papst on Facebook and X. Failure Factory, How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. You can pick it up anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, or your local bookstore. If they don't carry it, can certainly order it for you. And keep the conversation going. Please pick up a copy of the book, read it, let me know what you think. Reach out to me. I'm very easy to get a hold of, and I check all of my social media accounts and emails, and I will get back to you. My goal here is to really inform people about what's going on and keep the conversation going, with the hopes of trying to improve the public education system.
And Chris, what's your final message for all the listeners out there tonight?
Get involved, understand what's going on. We have to know the problem. You have to know what the problem is before you can fix it. And what Failure Factory is showing you what the problem is.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for sitting and sharing your tea with me and my listeners out there. I want to thank all the people who joined us in the studio tonight and who are watching. If you have any questions or any feedback that you'd like to share with Miss Liz or Chris, just let me know. You guys could always reach me at my email address, bookingmissliz@gmail.com, or check out my website, www.misslizteatime.com. We're just going to do a quick wrap up of what tonight's tea time was, and then I will see you everybody on Thursday with the beginning of July. And July's press release has been released, so you can check out the 22 incredible guests that are coming in July and sitting and sharing their teas with Miss Liz. What an eye-opening, important conversation tonight. Chris, thank you for bringing your dedication to investigative journalism and your commitment to uncovering facts that encourage meaningful dialogue. Your work reminds us that asking difficult questions is often the first step towards creating positive change. Tonight, we explored education, accountability, investigative reporting, public policies, and the responsibilities we all share in supporting the next generation. One of the strongest takeaways from tonight's conversation is this: every child deserves the opportunity to receive an education that prepares them for a successful future. Your research encourages communities, educators, policymakers, parents, and citizens to look beyond statistics and ask how systems can better serve the students who depend on them every single day. You also reminded us that awareness alone is not enough. Awareness must inspire throughout conversation, responsible leadership, and meaningful action. As we close tonight's tea time, I leave everyone with this thought. What role can each of us play in helping create opportunities where every child has a chance to learn, grow, and reach their full potential? Because investing in our children is investing in our future. Thank you, Chris, for your commitment to truth, accountability, and shining a light on issues that deserve our attention. Until next time, keep asking thoughtful questions, keep seeking solutions, and keep serving real life tea, one conversation at a time. And tonight's takeaway is real change begins when we have the courage to ask difficult questions, listen carefully to the answers, and work together to build better opportunities for the future generations. And I'll see everybody on Thursday, and we'll do this all over again.